Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack compelling source material, give you those key nuggets of knowledge, help you get informed fast. Today, we're exploring a really profound personal journey. It's about spiritual evolution, community building, all through the experiences of Jen Hatmaker. Her story, I think, gives us a powerful lens on challenging beliefs and, well, forging a new path.
Absolutely. And our mission today really is to pull out the key insights from Jen Hatmaker's perspective. It's quite unique. We'll dig into her departure from conservative evangelicalism, and her search, her quest for a more inclusive, authentic spiritual life. Her story touches on these universal themes, right? Identity, belonging, and just the sheer courage it takes to evolve, especially when you're in the public eye.
So Jen Hatmaker's story, it really kicks off with her upbringing. She talked about growing up in Texas in what she called a pretty traditional conservative Southern Baptist culture. And for her, that was like the whole world. She said she had zero outside perspective to challenge it. It just was.
Yeah, that lack of outside perspective is key. And that really sets the stage for what she calls her point of inflection. Her discomfort, interestingly, wasn't initially with the core tenets of her faith. It was more with the institutional aspects, the trappings around it.
The structures.
Exactly. She mentioned a stifling of power and expression and contribution and inclusion, particularly for women, and also the exclusion of LGBTQ plus community and gender fluid or nonconforming people and more. Those specific limitations were the friction points for her.
And she noticed it wasn't just her, right? She saw that this faith system, as it was practiced, wasn't working for other people.
Yeah.
Those who were othered, people experiencing racism, even those just labeled doubters and cynics. Plus, she pointed out how the institution handled things like abuse and trauma, sometimes in ways that sort of actually compounded suffering. That's a heavy observation.
It really is. And it's fascinating because her own belief in a vibrant faith, one leading to what she calls life abundant, is what pushed her. It made her ask, okay, is this system a big lie, or is it maybe just human error, flawed human systems? And that prompted her to ask these new questions.
Yeah.
Questions you just weren't allowed to ask in her tradition.
A tradition where belonging itself could be weaponized.
Precisely. Where belonging was often used as a weapon by these very rigid communities that, really prioritize certainty above everything else.
So asking these questions, she knew what was coming. She anticipated being labeled a pariah and an outcast.
Huge consequences.
Within the community that had basically defined her whole life and career up to that point, she faced this really stark choice. Her established career or her integrity.
And she chose integrity.
She did, which meant her character, her credibility, even her authority, all just thrown into question. She felt, in her words, canceled overnight.
And we need to underline that point. This wasn't just losing a job or a platform. For Jen, it felt like her actual core identity was shattering. It wasn't just community ties. It was who she was. That intersection of public rupture and deep personal identity, it's intense.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, I think. In the places she forfeited belonging, she then found it elsewhere.
Yeah, that's a key turn.
She discovered this whole different kind of faith community, one defined by spiritual curiosity. She described it as not as fragile as the one she left, and crucially, not terrified of questions or cynicism.
A space that could handle doubt.
Exactly. A space where people could actually say, I'm wrong, or, you know what, I've changed my mind, or even just, I'm not sure. And that brought her, she said, a joy, a delight that felt so much less punitive.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, her spiritual evolution was happening right alongside this rediscovery of her role as a woman. Remember, she grew up in that patriarchal spiritual environment.
Yeah.
Where, no women were senior pastors, no women preached because Bible. So part of her journey was actively stepping into my own spiritual authority, saying, essentially, I don't need a white man's endorsement anymore.
Which leads to her current view on organized religion. She says she's now very suspect of organized religion.
Understandably, perhaps.
Yeah, noting how it's often built on a power hierarchy and can hide, a really toxic work culture.
But, and this is important, despite tearing down those traditional structures, she still talks about a wild faith.
Wild faith? What does that mean?
She describes it as wilderness-based, prioritizing curiosity and belonging. It's like a faith untamed by strict rules, more about exploration and real connection. And what's really telling is she says, the Jesus part I just couldn't get away from. She still found him deeply subversive.
So Jesus remained even when the structures fell away.
For her, yes. He was the constant in the change.
Now, building this new path, especially so publicly, that takes courage. She talked about her approach. She said she gave herself permission super early on to not know, to get it wrong, to kind of be sloppy.
Which is so countercultural, especially for leaders.
Totally. And to lead with questions instead of answers. She made this choice to live her deconstruction out loud just in the public eye. She admits it was both good and hard, but ultimately necessary for her own peace of mind.
And doing it publicly, that served as this really powerful model, didn't it? Of vulnerability and curiosity and questioning and openness. She also made a point of modeling apologies, owning mistakes, saying, I messed up, I'm learning, trying to do better, recognizing that getting things wrong is just, well, it's inevitable when you're figuring things out, honestly.
And she explicitly rejected playing it safe. She said the old script was not worth my whole life.
Wow. Powerful framing.
Yeah. For her, the risk here is worth the reward being a faith that feels vibrant and alive and good, a faith where she believes good news actually means good for everyone.
This brings up an interesting contrast she makes. She talks about her evolving faith versus traditions that are all about certainty, the top-down didactic transmission of rules.
Right, the we have all the answers approach.
Exactly. And she points out, historically, that some early traditions, like Buddhism and the Jewish tradition, actually encouraged lively debate. Scriptures were seen as a starting place, not an ending place, a springboard for discussion. She argues that this got co-opted later, especially by Western influence, into this rigid rule book.
Which she finds
boring, exhausting, defeating, and ultimately exclusionary, because it shuts down the conversation.
So through all this, she's rediscovered the ability to be a learner again, to just freely say, I don't know.
Which she finds so much more interesting, more alive.
Okay, let's shift a bit. Jen mentions this academic research suggesting people in more rigid faith traditions report being happier.
Yeah, that's a common finding.
But she wonders, is that happiness really about the rule book? Or is it more about that deep sense of belonging, that feeling of being part of the beloved community?
It's a really insightful question. It separates the structure from the connection. And this ties into her hope for modern faith, to create more room for the curiosity while making sure you get to belong no matter what.
Belonging isn't conditional on certainty.
Exactly. The core ethos of her new community space is simple. We love each other, period. That provides what she terms felt safety. It protects the bond of love and connection. And that allows people to be, more of a human person with all the mess of it all.
She really pushes back against this societal pressure for perfection, calling it silly and, frankly, a nightmare.
Yeah, the performance aspect.
Right. She finds her spiritual flourishing outside of the structures. But she's clear this isn't about ditching accountability altogether. She maintains spiritual accountability, just not through rigid hierarchy. It's through men and women of full integrity in her life, people she trusts.
And she actively works to dispel what she calls the fake idea that leaving traditional structures means you lack holiness or accountability. In fact, she observes that some of the most tender, spiritually sensitive, and responsive people she knows are in this wilderness space outside the old walls.
Interesting.
She sees the way people who leave are often dehumanized, often based on things like misogyny, on racism, on homophobia, on patriarchy. She sees that as simply a fear tactic, a way to keep people in line.
So what does this all mean more broadly? You can kind of see parallels in other areas, right? Like education systems sometimes feel designed more for order than actual learning or growth.
That's a great point. And she suggests this current moment culturally is a really fertile window for questioning everything. Technology plays a huge role in that, obviously. It lets us connect and question in new ways. And this links directly to that growing demographic people call the nones, N-O-N-E-S. Those who say they're spiritual but not affiliated with any specific religion.
Right, huge group now.
Huge. And Jen points out, importantly, that this group isn't necessarily disinterested in Jesus. Many still find him trustworthy, subversive, even compelling.
Yeah.
They just don't connect with the institutional church part.
Okay, another big topic she touches on, cancel culture. And she has a pretty unique vantage point here.
She does. She says, I've both been a part of it, I've resisted it, and I've been on the receiving end of it. So she's seen it from multiple angles.
And the internet, she notes, has just dramatically amplified its scope, made the repercussions feel never-ending.
Yeah, the persistence of it online is different. But her advice for navigating it is, oh, it's quite profound.
What did she say?
Basically, keep living. Keep being the good person you are. Keep loving people. Keep being generous and giving. Keep being faithful. Just keep going.
Yeah.
She really stresses that the mob can't take that away from you, your core character, your actions, and that the intense heat, it will recede.
That's hopeful.
It is. And she highlights how cancel culture, often by its very nature, tends to eliminate this idea of room to grow and also the possibility of redemption, something she clearly believes is important.
Okay, so this whole journey, this shift in faith and perspective, it naturally led her to rethink other parts of her life, including her work. Which brings us to her latest book, Simple and Free.
Right, which revisits an experiment she did years ago.
It's described as offering a fascinating take on excess, using these experiments that really invite us to explore what happens when we strip down the key parts of life to their essentials. It's basically an updated version of her 7 experiment from about a decade back.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here, method-wise, is her decision not to rewrite the old text. Instead, she chose to leave in her original writing from 10 years ago and then annotate it, add her current thoughts, show how her perspective has evolved.
Even though her editor wasn't sure.
Apparently not. But Jen wanted to model what it looks like to grow and evolve as a human in real time. She acknowledged how messy and humbling that can be. But she did it anyway. She even hopes maybe in another 10 years she'll annotate it again.
Wow, embracing the ongoing journey.
Exactly. Not pretending to have arrived at some final perfect understanding.
So what are the areas she looks at? The book covers 7 areas of excess: food, clothing, spending, media, possessions, waste, and stress.
Pretty comprehensive list of modern pressures.
Definitely. And she reveals the one area that's been the biggest ongoing struggle for her, and she thinks for many others too. Which one is it?
It's media and technology. She says the landscape there has just changed so profoundly in the last decade. She feels like the tail is wagging the dog now.
That makes so much sense. And she points out why it's so hard, right? There are literally billions of dollars and countless brilliant minds dedicated to making this technology unputdownable.
Yeah, it's designed to hook us, leveraging our own brain circuitry against us in a way.
It really is.
But importantly, Jen avoids seeing it as purely binary, like it's not all evil or all addictive. She's very clear. Media and tech have also wildly changed my life for the better, enabling her career, building community, connecting with people.
So it's complicated.
Very. And especially for younger generations, she notes. These online platforms are the primary spaces for community. So telling people to just ditch it entirely, that could feel like telling them to outcast yourself, to cut yourself off from belonging. It's a much more gray area than we sometimes admit.
It absolutely is, which leads to her ongoing question, the one she's still wrestling with. She asks, how do I thread this needle well for myself, for my kids? How do we enjoy all the vibrancy that social media and technology have to offer us while not sacrificing real life here with real people?
That's the challenge, isn't it?
It really is. And she concludes it's a good question and one worth asking for all of us, really. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's circle back to Jen Hatmaker's own definition of a good life, especially thinking about what she's learned recently, maybe over the last 8 months or so.
Yeah, she shares this really profound realization that so much of what I have and do can fall away. So much is non-essential, ultimately. For her, now, the good life is a deeply lived life with my people. You know, my family, my extended family, my best friends.
The relationships.
Exactly. That core connection, she says, is the chief source of my joy. And crucially, it's enough for me. And she talks about learning what is enough, even after losing things she deeply cherished, like her marriage. Her good life now is fundamentally located in my relationship with the people that I love and who love me. That's become her #1 priority by 1,000 miles.
Wow. That's quite a distillation of what matters. Okay, so here's a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over. Considering Jen's journey, choosing integrity over expectation, finding belonging outside rigid boxes, learning to grow publicly, mistakes and all, what might it look like for you to embrace a bit more of a wild faith, or maybe even just a wild life? Prioritizing curiosity, vulnerability, authentic connection, maybe over certainty, and that constant pressure for perceived perfection in your own life. Something to think about.